Well, again, grateful to be here with you guys. This is one of those topics I've been wanting to talk about for a while. I actually did this trip a couple years ago. I thought it'd be perfect to talk about, but just kind of worked out that this is a good time to talk about it. Long form storytelling. I think that that's, it's interesting because with all of our students, this is one of those things that they're almost afraid of, a big photo essay. Like taking 1 or 2 or 3 photos of a thing, that's fine. But when you ask them to do a full photo essay or do something that's over a period of time, they get really, really intimidated. So I just kind of wanted to share one of my experiences and kind of the things I've learned over the years in doing that. So let me just go ahead and share my screen and we'll jump into this. Okay, here we go. Long form storytelling. So a couple of years ago, this is before pandemic, so that's like 100 years ago for the rest of us. BYU, every year we have our tour groups. They're different performing groups. They tour around the world. We usually have 3 or 4 groups out in different areas of the world, and I'm lucky enough to be able to tag along and document some of those for different purposes. But we hit a 40-year anniversary, or 40 years of traveling and visiting China and sending groups to China. So we wanted to do something big. So the university came up with this plan to say, let's take all of our groups to China and let's do a multi-city tour with 200 plus people, which was ambitious. It was really interesting. And when I heard about this, I'm like, okay, this is going to be fun, but this is going to be a lot of work. So it was about a 2.5-week tour in 3 cities. And I think that when you're faced with something like this, when you're faced with a really big photo essay, you panic, right? Like, how am I going to do this? There's so many different things you can do. So I'm going to walk you through kind of my process of preparing for this trip. First of all, pre-production. I think it's very important to identify right off the top, what's the story? We sometimes forget this. We're storytellers. We have to tell a story visually. And is the story about an individual? Is it about the group? Is it about the history of this tour? What is that story? Or are there multiple story threads that are going to run through that? And if you can identify the story early on, it makes it easier to kind of hone in on, key in on the things you need to be taking pictures of. I also think it's important to identify those key visuals right from the beginning. What do you think would be an image that would represent this whole tour? What's something you need for the cover of the magazine, or for, this photo essay or whatever. And going to the meetings, talking to people, kind of get an idea of what the expectations are on their end, helps you identify some of those key visuals. Next thing is research. I got the schedule for the tour and it was intimidating. And I did as much research as I could about the cities we were going to, the activities we were doing, what it was like, what was possible. I even tried to look up the different theaters we were performing in so that I could have an idea of, what different challenges I would have in each theater. And then finally, a story needs to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And in my pre-production kind of work, I try to think about, okay, how could I start this photo essay? How could I end it? What are the visuals, or what are moments that it might work out? Now, this pre-production work may go out the window when you get there and you find out, things aren't what you had supposed or what you had seemed. But I think it's really important to do that work beforehand, to just be prepared. That also helps you get the right amount of equipment that you need. In identifying the key visuals, I realized I really wanted to bring some strobes to be able to take some pictures of a dancer in different locations in China that might be the cover of our BYU magazine. So getting equipment is worked out. That's definitely part of that pre-production process. But in the actual trip, I think it's a little bit different. First of all, I think one of the things that's so important when you're doing a big photo essay, a long-term story, you need to build that trust with the subjects. Now, this was a hard thing to do with 200 people. We actually flew out on 5 different planes. So there was different groups went different days and got there earlier and later. So when I normally travel with a group, usually it's just we're all in one group, and I try to spend a lot of time in the first couple days talking to people, learning their names, helping them understand what I'm doing, why I'm, they can trust me, showing them pictures I'm taking so that they just kind of welcome me into that group. And that's something that definitely on this trip, I definitely had to do. Another thing that helps me is during a long photo essay like this or a project like this is to break it up into smaller stories. I think that that's really good because if you just say, here's a 3-week tour, go do a photo essay, it's just overwhelming. But if I say, okay, today we're going to go do this performance in this place, or we're going to go do a workshop with this dance group, and I just kind of think that's my photo essay. If I have a bunch of smaller photo essays, it makes a really great amount of images that you can pull the whole photo essay from at the end. I also think during the trip, talking to the key players, the directors of the groups, following the threads that they're finding, you know, talking to them about what stories they're seeing, what interesting things are happening, and as the tour is going on, I was able to kind of follow some of those threads and things that were happening. Another thing that's really important is look for patterns. And you know, this is something that it doesn't matter if you're shooting sports, you're shooting dance, patterns always emerge. For example, they would go through the same routine on a day where they're performing. Everything would be the same. The schedule would be the same. People would do this setup at this time, this setup at that time, and those patterns would follow out. So if I missed something one day, I could go the next day and say, okay, I missed it here, but it's going to happen here, and getting really comfortable with those patterns and really helped me kind of tell the whole story. And then finally, staying out of a rut. I think I saw that show that we performed in China 16 times. It's really easy to say, oh, you know, here's another thing. I forced myself to try and go to different locations, different spots in the theater, different areas every day. So I wasn't shooting the same thing every time. I was getting something unique, something different. There was one theater that was better to be backstage because the lighting was amazing backstage, versus another theater where the view from the balcony was amazing. Just try to stay out of a rut and try to always look for something unique and something different. Whenever I'm working with my students on any size photo essay, I always tell them that the building blocks of a storytelling, a visual storytelling, are overalls, mediums, and details. The overalls are kind of those scene setters. Those like, what's the sandbox that you're playing in? Usually it's a wide angle overall. Sometimes it's a long shot, but it's something that shows the entire environment. So the whole theater or the whole classroom, or just so that people understand where these pictures are being taken, where these actions are happening. The mediums are kind of like the bulk of the photos. They're like everything, you know, the people, the interaction. Most of what happens, most of what you shoot is going to be a medium, you know, it has a lot of stuff in it. And then the details are kind of those close-up photos that show some texture. They help tell the story. They give you just a little bit more extra flavor to the story. So here's kind of an example. So, you know, one of the theater, this would be an overall. This tells you we're performing on the stage. This is what it looks like. This is where everything's going to happen. But then medium, you know, we're showing some of the dancers in the middle of one of their performances, not seeing everything, but kind of seeing some of their actions. But then you can even see, just go into a detail that's showing just something that's very small, something specific about the interaction with the audience and the dancers. On the Great Wall, here's an example. Overall, you know, medium, the interaction with them and other people, and then maybe just a portrait of an individual sitting on the Great Wall. Those really help. Those going overall medium detail really does help me kind of make sure that I capture what I need to at each location, and it gives me a lot of rich things to work on with the story. Before we jump in the trip, any questions, Nate, that we want to go through?
Nope, no questions yet. So just a reminder, if there's more that have, you know, those who have come on, if you have any questions, just go ahead and put it in the chat, and then I'll ask them to Jaren when we have a break.
Yeah. Okay, so go ahead, Nate. What?
I was saying we're good to go.
So this is I don't want this to turn into the uncle's slideshow, right? So I'll try and go through this fast. But these are just kind of some of the things that I saw on my trip. You know, pictures of people putting stuff on the bus and in the airport. This is, again, that important time to really get people to get to know you, what you're about. Some of them know you from other tours. Some of you don't know you at all. And you just have to make sure that they know who you are, that they're comfortable, that they stop flinching every time you pull out your camera. Shooting the first day or two, especially, it's really important to kind of be there with them and talk to them and interact with them, and that they'll get more comfortable as the time goes along. You know, but definitely getting their reaction as they show up to China. And we do a lot of workshops. We go visit with other dance groups, and they perform and we perform. That interaction is really important between the two groups. And, you know, we'll show them a dance. They'll show us one of their dances. But these are fun. These are fun moments. And, you know, and it's really fun, you know, even though you don't speak the same language, really fun to see these students build bridges with each other. But even, you know, having the camera out at all times, whenever I'm traveling, I always have a camera with me, always. If I'm walking to the store to get a soda, I still have a camera with me because you never know what's going to happen. And these moments are fun. You know, that's natural, and it's you can get some really good flavor for your photo essay when you get to capture some of those moments. I try to tell people I'm always working, because I always am. I'm always looking. There's no time off for a photographer. This is in the first city we went to is Beijing, of course, and you know, everybody wants to go have the bugs and eat the bugs in the bug market, which is actually getting really hard. They're kind of closing that down. They're not showing it anymore. But here's one of our orchestra that went and did a workshop with other musicians, and just getting that interaction between the two. But even, you know, just making sure and backing off, being able to see kind of the entire setting and not just the tight shot, but you know, where is the environment? You're in China, you know, you want to make sure that you're showing people where you're at. Students just go out and talk to people just randomly on the streets. Just some of the details that are in the beautiful architecture that's out there. One of the students says, is there any way I could get a picture? You know, and I'm like, well, yeah, awesome. This would be, what a fun place to have a portrait done. But then as we had a performance, you know, I asked the guys, hey, do you guys mind if I take some pictures of you getting ready? So, you know, it's always awkward. Hey, do you mind if I take pictures of you getting dressed? But they're cool with it. But it's fun to show kind of just what goes into it, those details. And then as he's practicing by himself, surrounded by all the gear, just fun to set the scene. Getting an overall of the performance. And then here's an example after the fact. I saw this door that we were coming in and out of. I knew at the end of the day, this might make a good photo. So I just kind of got there and waited, and I didn't really like how crowded it was. As less people went through at the end, it was great, but I didn't really love that there was this gentleman here. So I just waited, and then finally I got a shot of just one student walking out, and that's one of the photos I really like. Just enjoy as a good way to end that kind of day. Going to the Great Wall, which the Great Wall is pretty amazing. It's one of the, you know, really cool things that you really get to experience when you go to China, and it overwhelms you. You see it, pictures of it, it just doesn't do it justice when you're there and you realize this was built by hand over thousands of miles. It's amazing.
Hey, Jaren.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about kind of the gear that you travel with? Stephen was just asking, he says, I assume you're traveling light, but what gear are you using?
Yeah, I definitely traveled light. This was a unique trip. Usually we're Canon shooters, but this is the 2019. So Canon didn't have very good silent cameras. We were recording our performances for a TV special that was done in China and was going to be aired here at BYU TV. So I had to have silent cameras. And so we actually got some Sonys, A9-1 and A9-2. And I basically had two bodies, and almost everything I shot was 16-35, 70-200. That was my main kind of, I had two bodies on me at all times. And that made it so I didn't have to switch lenses very much. I had a couple primes with me and a couple other things, but almost everything I did was with those two cameras. I tried definitely to go very light as much as possible, because it's all day, every day. I would actually have a sling bag with just one camera and those two lenses for a lot of those trips, you know, going on the Great Wall and stuff like that, where I wanted to even have less equipment. And I also traveled, this is rare, but I actually had some pro photo lights, just the B10s. I had a pair of those in a Pelican for doing some portraits later on, which we'll talk about. But that was it. Tried to keep it really simple, a laptop and a couple cameras and 4 lenses. Does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah, and then Elizabeth was asking, she's saying like it was assumed, you know, that you're going on this trip, that you're traveling with the group. But in a situation where there is a group that's traveling, how would you approach the situation to advocate your need to be there or your desire to be there? She said their greatest challenge seems to be justifying the need to have someone there to document these types of experiences. So how do we approach that?
So that's a great question. I think, first of all, it's important to show them what you can do. You know, as we know, as photographers, you never get hired for something that you've never shot before. I mean, a food photographer is never asked to shoot the Super Bowl, right? And it's the same on your campus. If you can show them a photo essay you've done for somebody else and the results, you know, like here's a gallery we did, or here's how we got this in the magazine, that opens that door. But sometimes it takes, you know, you going out there and pushing it and paying for part of it, you know, they're having your department pay for part of it. We're pretty fortunate that we have a long tradition of doing this. And they, for the magazine article, for different publications that were come out on the different groups, they knew that they needed us. But you have to be an advocate for yourself. You absolutely have to. You have to make sure that they know the value that you bring, and that's why I think showing past examples is really important. Here's a tour I did with another group last year. Here's what we were able to get from it. Is this something you would like to have on your tour? Do you have anything to add to that, Nate?
I'm sorry, I was reading this stuff, so I wasn't listening to everything that you were saying. To be honest,
Not paying attention. Not paying attention.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's hard. It's really hard. But you have to be that advocate for yourself. And once you get one great trip and make a great photo essay, it's so much easier for after that. That first one's usually the hardest. And you don't have to leave the country. You don't have to go somewhere with a group to get a great photo essay. You can do a great photo essay on campus, but you have to take it to that next level of, we're going to make this epic. We're going to spend multiple days on this. I'm going to get a great exposure gallery or other type of gallery. Having one of those makes the next one a lot easier. That would be my answer.
Yeah. And I think too, one of the things that, I don't know if argument's the right word, but one of the things you can use to help plead your case is remembering that we are also the visual historians of the university. And so like something like this is very historical for the university. And if it's not documented, nothing is going to be seen or shown later on. There will be no visual history of this experience. So that's another thing you could use to plead your case. Another question from Jeff. So kind of because you were in China, so social media is a little bit different over there. So he's asking, were you pushing things for social media, like in the live gallery or daily updates, or what was the process with this?
So it was a little bit different. Actually, we did something unique in China where we were on Chinese social media networks. We had started a BYU social media channels on some of their different networks, and we were pushing stuff to them, promoting upcoming concerts, showing some of that interaction with people. We had one of the big news stations in Beijing did a story on our tour, sharing that kind of stuff there. So we actually weren't sharing stuff in the US in real time. And that's a little different than we normally would act, but there were a lot of reason for it. We were just so busy. We were overloaded. Our focus really was in China. When we got back to the US and we started putting stuff together, that's when we kind of shared more of that stuff. So live gallery, I didn't really do, which is for me, just blasphemous to say that, but I did each night I'd do an edit of 10 to 15 images or so, and then I'd send it to our social media person who was traveling with us. And he was able to use those on his different things. And then, yes, we did send some of those back to our team back in the US that shared some of those. So yeah, that's a great question. It was a very unique experience because, being in China, you don't have access to some of those social media networks that we're used to. But to leverage their local social media networks, that was pretty cool. It was a different experience. Any other questions, Nate?
No, we're good.
Okay, I'll try and run through this faster so we can get to the end part. But one thing you always want to do if you're in an iconic location, take a shot. This is one of the group photos of the entire group that's with us. I think it's really important to do these. You may say, I'm never going to use this in the photo essay, but this is that history that Nate was talking about. And then when we're on the wall, I did the same thing. This, not only does it give you a good image for the team, for them to have, the kind of image they'll show their grandkids, it also endears you to them. They're like, oh, you're doing this for us too. It's not just for you doing your own thing. And it does open up some doors. So we definitely would try to shoot some of those images. But then after that, it was just, we would document what was happening. Had to get the obligatory photo on the wall. I had to give this camera to one of my friends, and it only took 10 tries to get a photo of me actually in focus. So, but just watching, kind of waiting for what's happening. Always watch for signs. I love signs. Traveling around the world, this is one of my favorite signs. But traveling with a large group is really, really hard because there's so many stories. There's so many things that are happening, and you're just trying to pay attention. So they had, I said, there's like 5 different buses. I would try to rotate onto different buses so I could get to know some of the different students and, some of the things that they were doing. When we actually got to the tour and setting up for the tour, I would just wander around and look for different stories and different things. This is what, one of the groups is they're playing Smash Brothers in the dressing room. One of the stories was that some of our equipment got lost along the way, and so we had to go buy new, things and props and stuff. And that was one of the stories. So I had to make sure I photographed and documented some of that, the behind the scenes stuff that you don't normally see. But this is really rich. It tells the story. I mean, what you see on the stage is only a portion of what actually happens. So I tried this. I tried to rotate myself through the different groups on each performance and find different things. Always shooting this, scene setter. This is the building we were going to be performing in. Some of the behind the scenes of the directors, just funny things that happen because you're there and you're ready, as he's rising up out of the smoke, the undead. We did have a dress rehearsal, and that was a really good opportunity for me to kind of dial in what I needed to do, but also get a straight on center shot of everything that I maybe wouldn't be able to do it when we had people there. So it gave me a good idea of what we would expect. It also helped me with lighting. I know what the lights are going to be at different numbers, and I was able to get into the pit with the orchestra and get some shots there because there's no audience. Then we got an audience, and of course that changes. It's very limited on where you can go and what you can do, but you have to document the audience as part of the story. That's what we wanted, the interaction. So getting these side angle shots, the stage is blown out, you can't see what's going on there, but it's about the audience. It's about seeing them interact with us. And yeah, these are dark. I mean, shot a 30th of a second at 10,000 ISO. I would have loved to have traveled on this trip with an R5 or an R3 because of what they can do. But, on an A9 and an A9 II, this is what I had to do the best I could. They always walked around with these no photographing signs before the concert. And then during the concert, if you were taking pictures or video with your phone, they would shine a laser light on you and kind of, chide you. But it was kind of funny. So, the end of our performance, it was really fun to kind of finish it up. And then what surprised us is when we went out and kind of just met with people in the audience, how much fun they had meeting with our students and wanting to take pictures and wanting to interact with them. And that's a big part of the story for us because it's about us making connections, making bridges in China. More tour stuff.
Hey, Jaren, while you're going through these, Jeff was asking too, like how many people were there to tell this story and to like capture it? You talked about social media person, you're there. How many people are there to work on this project?
From our office, we had a social media manager, and he was doing social media for the whole tour, and then me as a still photographer. And then BYU TV, our TV station, the university, they were doing a documentary. So they had a couple, 3 or 4 people that were part of the trip. And then our student paper had a couple people that were there doing some social media and some still photos, but they weren't with us at all times. It was kind of on and off. So it was kind of a mixture of things. They were doing stuff for them. The documentary crew was doing stuff for BYU TV, and then I was doing stuff for kind of the general group and the photo essay for the magazine and the stories there. So it was quite a bit, and but with 200 people, there was a lot of stories to tell, and we overlapped sometimes we didn't. That was one of those things we tried to plan out in the beginning. I love these moments. Just, she was just wanted a hug. So it was so fun to watch him, these kids just make friends with people that they didn't understand what's going on. Finished up in Beijing. We went to Xi'an bullet train. They travel very fast. It was quite fun to see, but to travel across China on a bullet train and then get to Xi'an, which is just an ancient city. It's where the terracotta warriors are. So this is our social media manager, John, and we were out taking pictures. There was nothing on the schedule. This is right after we arrived in Xi'an, and we got a text from one of the kids saying, "Hey, there's a festival going on behind our hotel. We're going to go out and dance." So we ran across the city and got back, and this is what we saw. And if you can see in the back here, this is it's kind of like an ongoing festival, but the funny part is the stage is in the back there. They just had these laid up floors that you could dance on, and our kids started dancing. They brought some of their props out and started dancing, and then everybody that was watching the performance on the stage turned around and started watching us. Really kind of a cool moment, except for the people that were performing on stage. I don't think they liked it so much. But our different groups would come in and have fun, and then they'd invite kids out to dance, and the kids just had so much fun. And again, that interaction. But this is one of those photos when one of our kids was breakdancing, and just loved this moment of us interacting with people from China, and oh, it was fun. But this is one of those things that only happens because you were listening and because people were trusting you and telling you, hey, this is going to happen, this is going on, totally off the schedule, and it turned out to be one of the really key moments of our tour. But traveling through the city, getting to see some of the sites, we definitely stand out in a city like Xi'an. But this interaction with the culture and with the people is really important.
A quick question from Sydney, Jaren.
What's that?
The quick question from Sydney, going back to the dance photos. Did you have to worry about getting IDs for like the kids' permission to use those photos?
No, we didn't worry about it. No, we didn't worry about it there. I don't think we had any issues with that. And the parents, we tried to communicate the best we could, but we tried, I pointed my camera, pointed the parent, okay, take a picture, and they were okay with it. But no, that isn't something we had an issue with. Let's see. Another performance, different theater, so different lighting, different areas to shoot from, different things, try to take advantage of that. And again, more people love, these are the dunk team, and the dunk team was like the superstars of the tour. I guess it's becoming a really big thing in China with the popularity of basketball, but everybody wanted to talk to the dunk team. It was quite funny. You can kind of see here, some of the groups are a little less attended to than the dunk team. Here's our president and his wife. It's kind of watching some of that. It's kind of fun to get their interaction. Did go to the Terracotta Warriors, and this is a good example. You can't just be a tourist and take the tourist type shots, right? What I need to do is instead focus on our interaction with the what they're doing. So here's our students kind of looking in, and here's our students up here in the corner. We're looking at another place, behind the glass, showing their experience is what my job was. Another performance. This is a time where I went into the pit to try and get something different, got a low angle and a little bit different background than I was able to get them during their performance. Side angle, this is one of those stages that being on the side worked really well. Love being able to see that interaction with the audience and the stage. And again, dunk team, because they're superstars. Another travel to another city. This is Shanghai. Funny to see our one of our singing groups perform, and then the police come and shut that down because apparently we weren't supposed to do that. But always wanted to try and get some of the environment, and I love getting the pictures of our, promoting our concerts, and then more just kind of behind the scenes. Well, there's a lot of standing around, there's a lot of waiting, and during those moments I would try to go find something different. I mean, this guy's working up in the sound booth, and I'm glad I was able to get his picture and make sure that he was a part of the photo essay, and he was really appreciative of that. But again, just more performances as we're coming to the end of it. And then just simple things that are happening backstage, like our hoop dancers teaching some people how to do the hoop dances. President talking to people before one of the last performances. And then that was the last performance, but I wasn't done. So this is kind of that famous background you see of Shanghai, the Bund. And I knew that this would be one of those backgrounds that'd be great. It'd be a great setting to go and take that picture for the magazine cover. So we went and scouted it, and I used the Sunseeker app to kind of find out when sunrise would be, where the sun would be coming up. I realized we had to go further down the sidewalk to get a better angle of that. So we woke up super early in the morning, had finagled a taxi over to the Bund, and got there kind of as sunrise is starting to happen. And of course, the police came and talked to us. Now, this is the hard part is, you don't speak the language, they don't speak your language. And I found that Google Translate is amazing. You speak into your app or let them speak into the app. It translates from Chinese to English and back and forth. And apparently we were not allowed to take a picture there in a traditional uniform. We had a Native American dancer, but they wouldn't allow us to take a picture there. So we went further down, farther away, and quickly, and I'm saying quickly, very quickly, shot a picture of our dancer. So quickly that the guy in the background is just there and he wasn't moving. So we got a couple shots, and then I am like, well, I really want to do some more pictures. I want to do something different. And I look right, and I see some policemen starting to walk towards us. I look left, I see some policemen starting to walk towards us. And I had to ask myself, is this picture worth staying in China for an extra few months? And the answer was no. So we were done. We got the shot we needed, and that was the end of the tour. So that's actually Photoshop the guy out of the image. That's what it ended up looking like. But it turned out to be one of my favorite images. It took a lot of extra work to get, but that's the reason I took those lights. That's the reason I was planning for. This is one of the shots that I'm glad it did turn out. So before I jump into this part right here, any questions we want to jump through?
Nope, we're good.
Okay.
Anybody have any questions they want to jump in right now before Jaren switches over? So how do you, here's one from David. How do you balance respecting the culture and the people and capturing the flavor of the area?
I mean, I think you just don't jump in somebody's face and take pictures of them. You like, say, if you can learn, like, okay, take a picture or point at the camera and be okay, thumbs up, and everybody was fine. Nobody had any issues, and they were cool. The funny thing is again, you're traveling with a bunch of dancers and such in China. Everybody was coming up to them wanting to take pictures with them with their own phones. So we didn't really have any issues where we were bothering people. It was more us accommodating other people's requests. And I think you just have to understand the culture, and you have to try and be respectful of it. There are times you definitely don't take a picture. There's moments, there's places, certain temples and stuff, I would not take pictures, just to be careful. Having your guide or having your translator and asking those questions, where are situations where I should be more careful? What's the best way to approach taking pictures? That's something I think being respectful is really important.
Here's a question from Lonnie. He was just wondering, like, why weren't you able to take photos there? You want to go into a little bit more in depth on like the cultural dress?
So basically, because of some of the issues China is dealing with some of their provinces and stuff, they basically just have a rule in certain locations you cannot take pictures in like native dress, even though we're talking Native American, not Nepal or somewhere else in China. They just kind of flat out had a rule. Same thing on the Great Wall. I wanted the dancer to dress up on the wall and take some pictures on the Great Wall, and they wouldn't let us take the costumes onto the Great Wall. And that's just one of those things you have to deal with. You have to adapt and work with to make sure you're not breaking any of their laws and respecting them. But it definitely made things challenging as far as a lot of the photos that I had planned to do just couldn't happen. So I'm grateful we were able to at least get one photo with the background we wanted, but it wasn't in the place I wanted. And like I said, there was a lot of places where I just couldn't do it.
And we're glad you didn't get arrested.
Well, Nate would have had a lot of extra work for a few months if I was still there. So, okay, well, that's the end of the trip part. Now you're back, right? And now I had 30-something thousand pictures. What do you do with those pictures, right? How do you take 30,000 images and turn them into a photo essay? I think, first of all, you need to realize that there's a big difference between a photo gallery and a photo essay. And that's one of my biggest kind of pet peeves is photographers are the worst at this. They throw a photo gallery up and expect everybody to clap. And a photo essay is not a photo essay is very different than gallery. A photo essay is telling a story. And a photo essay may not have your favorite photos. It has the right photos in it. That's what you have to remember, because you're trying to tell that story. So here's some of those mistakes that I see. In photo essays, too often, we just have too many photos. Again, they're our favorite children, and we don't want to get rid of any of them. But too many photos, people don't have the patience to go through, 5,000 photos. You need to make sure that you get down to your best photos. You're only as good as your worst photo. And again, if there's too many photos, people are just going to give up. They're not going to go through the story, and then you failed. So one of the ways to get around this is get feedback, especially from other photographers. Hey, can you look at this photo essay? Is it too much? Do I need to cut back? What are the images that don't make sense in this? That feedback is so important. Another thing that drives me crazy is the random placement of images. Again, I like chronological order because it's kind of telling the story. Sometimes you need to go out of order, but for example, like say a football game, if you have an image, if you start with an image of the celebration, it doesn't make sense to me. That's the end of the story, not the beginning of the story. So you just be aware that, the order of people look through photos in their heads, chronological makes sense. It's progressional and it's telling that story. I also think that you should have captions or some text with it because you need context. And I know photographers don't like writing, but the picture doesn't tell the full story. Sometimes they need that context. So with this photo essay, our social media specialist, he wrote an article and it went with the photos, and that helped me kind of distinguish which photos needed to be happening where. So that was really important. And again, just a reminder, a story needs a beginning, a middle, and an end. As part of that post-production process is, I'll identify and then I'll edit all the keepers. So I'll knock it down to a bunch of JPEGs that I feel like that might be really good to tell the story. And then I sit down in Photo Mechanic and I kind of break the story into chapters. Maybe we're going to do it by city, Beijing, and then Xi'an, and then Shanghai. Or maybe I'm going to do it by group. This group's doing this group's doing that. I also use hero images kind of to make chapter divisions, and I'll show you guys that in a second when we get into exposure. I also want to pay attention to arrange my layout with some visual variety. I don't want like two subjects next to each other the same, or I want two colors that are too similar. I try to break it up so that visually it changes each time you go from photo to photo. So let's jump into exposure and kind of show that. Okay. Let me share my screen. Sorry, it's messy. I'm a photographer. Get rid of this. So I don't know if many of you have experience with exposure. I really like exposure. It's something that works really well for what we do. But basically, it's really easy. It's just drag and drop. So for example, I know I'm going to start this story off with this hero image. That's going to be kind of the start. And you can come down here and you can change, some of it. I want to take that dark overlay off. All right, I'm going to put a title here. China's spectacular. And then really easy. All you need to do is choose photos and drop them. So I'm going to take just one section and show you. So this is 130 images, just kind of some of the things I think would make good the final photo essay. And they're listed by capture time, so it's in the chronological order. But let's say that I'm going to just focus on that section in Xi'an. So I'm going to take, when I say a chapter break for that Xi'an section, I'm going to start and you just drag and drop, and then full width means that it will go all the way across the screen. So it's loading here. So I really like that image, and I feel like that's a good image to kind of start off that section. That's what I call my chapter. So I'm going to go there, and then I'm going to say, okay, I've already kind of starred off some of these photos. I want to get some photos of our experiences in traveling there, and then maybe interacting with people. So there, and then there, and then maybe there's some of the architecture, and there's some of us traveling through. And then that right there, you can go up to, I think it's 9 photos on a section. So I've got 7 photos right there. That's great. So I'm going to drag and drop this whole section over to photo set. And it's going to take a minute to load them. But once it loads them, then I'm going to rearrange them a little bit, looking for that visual variety. Okay, so here's the photo set now. And inside the photo set, I'm like, okay, which would be great images that are bigger and maybe the ones that are be smaller. So I actually really like this image to start with of the city. So I'm going to hit and expand that to the width. Oh. Fill the row. Good. And then I'm going to say, okay, I like these next to each other. They're different, but maybe I'll mix it up and I'll go here. I want this to be here and this to be here. Or maybe I'll go down later and say, it really makes more sense if this photo is kind of a part of the tourism section of the city. And I will, again, try to make sure that they're not too similar. Like, I don't really love the fact that these 2 images down here are very similar. They're kind of the same spot. So I'm going to move one up. I'll move one down. And you have to remember that some people are going to look through your photo essays and they're going to look at it like this, the layout with the layout. But so many people just go in and they'll go one by one and look through the photo essay like this. So you just have to remember that it needs to kind of work both ways. And when I say visual variety, again, it's like, I don't want 2 very, very similar images next to each other. I want it to be like, this is an overall, this is an interaction. This is, I'll go from the interaction to something with the students on the street, and then I'll go to some detail type shot. Just trying to mix it up so that it's just not the same. You can also come in here and you can add a caption. So I could say Xi'an at sunset. And then that will be in this full image right here. But also if you hover over it, it will come down and then you can also do the same thing for a set. And then let's say I want to do another section.
Hey, Jaren, real quick, while you're picking photos. So Jeff's asking if you've used Adobe Spark, and if so, pros and cons to that and exposure.
I've used Spark. It's very similar and it's just fine. I like exposure. I just feel like exposure is a little bit cleaner looking. But exposure Spark's just fine too. Use it. Either one works great. I think it's more what you do with it than the exposure versus Spark. I have no really strong feelings about it. It's just personal preference. I haven't used Spark for a while, and I'm trying to remember what it was I didn't like about it as much as exposure, but they're pretty similar. Let's see. I'm going to come in here and do our show in Sion, and I'm going to do a section on that show. So maybe I'm going to have, let's see what we have in here. So I definitely am going to want this image here at the end. That's kind of saying goodbye. But I also, I'm going to say I like this one and this one. I'm going to select multiple images and drag them over. And it's just the same thing, doing a photo set, going through. Now, again, sometimes I'll build out the text, like I already have the text and I'll build it out and put the chapters. Other times I'll lay out the photos and I'll just add the text to it. But the text is real easy. You can just copy and paste it. There's a title for the section. So you can just say Sion performance. And then you can copy and paste your text into here. And I'm just going to pull up really quick so you can kind of see the finished product. Because again, we don't really have time to build the whole thing. But that's the process you go through. But here is the actual final product. And you can kind of see we have, divided up by cities, but then you get some of that feature information about it. There's a variety as you're going through it. Talks about some of the challenges we had with getting some of our equipment there and how we overcame that. And you can kind of see when you hover over, you're going to see some captions that give more information. But this is basically what I do. I try to build it like this. And then once I get it all built out, that's when I'll go back and I'll say, okay, Nate, take a look at this. Tell me, what do you think? Is this too much? Is this not enough? I'll go to other photographers, especially ones that aren't familiar with the story, and get, their read on it. It says, wow, that was really cool, but it was long. You just need to cut way, way down. But yeah, sorry, this is kind of the end right here. And that's kind of one of the images I finished with. So that's kind of my process. Let's answer some questions.
Yeah, I'll just say at this point, if anybody has any questions, go ahead and just unmute yourself and chime in.
Really nice stuff, Jaren. The pictures are beautiful. One quick question I just put up on the thing though is I noticed with all those chapters and all those different little stories, it seems like you narrowed everything down to like 5 to 6 images per chapter. Is that about right?
Yeah, and sometimes the chapter would be 2 of those photo sections, but it depends. And this one's a hard one because it's such a big story. There's so many threads. There's so many things going on. This is probably the biggest one I've ever done. I think it's maybe still too big. But again, it wasn't just a photo essay. It was also the text that was the magazine article. So it kind of depends. But for my general photo essays, you'll see a lot of them we do with athletic teams. They're quite a bit shorter. But yeah, chapter wise, I'd say probably 6 to 7 would be kind of what a lot of the chapters are, sometimes 8. And then I really do feel like just having that full width photo as a chapter break just helps you in your head say, okay, this is another chapter. This is a different part of the story. This is the next thing that's happening. So yeah, it part of it's by feel, but I think it's really easy to overwhelm people with too much. And again, you're only as good as your worst photo. So try to get those photos out.
Great stuff, man.
I'm guessing that you have full control over what goes in the edit for the exposure gallery.
Yeah.
How much input do you have on other uses?
Well, I mean, I have, like with the magazine, they asked what I thought, and for the most part, we agreed. There are a few that I'm like, oh, I wish you would have used this instead of that. It kind of depended on the uses because this stuff became marketing materials for the next couple of years. This stuff became wall art for our buildings. It kind of went a little bit of everywhere. Thankfully, I had a lot of input in most of those things. I wouldn't say there were too many instances where I didn't, but for the most part, I had a lot of input. And the great thing is you have the photos. So, you know, when you give them the edit, here's the best of, use this best of stuff first. It does generally work out a lot better.
Yeah, I think that's the key to Jaren was saying is, as the photographer, I kind of want to be in control of what images get used. And so I will present, or we will present people with our edits and the ones that we choose first. And then if they want, they can go through all the unedited photos and take a look at them. But if you present what you feel is best first, it seems like 9 times out of 10, people are going to just use what you give them. So
Yeah,
I
think
think I have control that way.
we shot 30-something thousand images. I think I had edited and distributed to the group something like 700 or 800 images. Most people didn't want to go beyond 800. They were like, okay, this is good. We're fine. And I think I had my hero collection of like my top 100 images. That was the first thing I would give people. And for the most part, they chose from that collection. So nobody wants to look through 30,000 images, least of all me. It was a lot.
Jaren, how many photos were in the, well, I guess maybe back up. Did you just do that one exposure piece? Was that it?
This is the main one. Yeah, this is the main one. I think there were some smaller stuff that were for like different groups, because again, there was like 6 performing or 7 performing groups. But as far as like for the overall big picture, this is the main one. I think there was 108 images or something. It was a little long. I wish I could have had a little bit shorter, but again, we were trying to touch a lot of different things.
And then
probably a little longer than I normally would go.
2 other follow-on questions. Then
Yep.
The second one, what was your turnaround time? Was there a deadline given? I'm guessing not. It was probably just, while there's still some energy and interest in it, would probably be just the.
I would say the deadline was when the magazine article came out, and I had months, so I was fine. I had no problem. I think it was summer. I got back in June, and I took a few weeks off, and then I kind of dove in and tried to get some edits done. So I think I had things done within a month. But we did, like I say, there was stuff that was short term. There was social media stuff that was turned around much quicker, but I was doing it while I was traveling. But as far as like the final edit and the final photo essay, I was partially waiting on the text before I could finish the photo essay. But the photos were pretty much done within a few weeks of being done.
And then my last question, you've in the past been really good and really thorough about measuring effectiveness through social media stats, analytics, etc. Did you do the same for this? Could you tell that it was, getting a lot of reach, or can you go into a little bit of that?
Yeah, no, I Google Analytics. I hook up Google Analytics to our exposure site, and I get really good data. In fact, I know I reported on some of that data to some of the people that were involved. And then, of course, being that it went to the magazine, we also had the reach of the magazine and how their clicks did on their website and that kind of stuff too. So yeah, absolutely. I think it's important too. I think the numbers are important. I think it's important to get the reach, and it helps you and as a photographer and as a storyteller know how to tell better stories. Something that's happened in the past 3 years, and I know you guys are experiencing the same things. That attention span has just shrunk even smaller. Like I wouldn't do this long of a photo essay anymore. I would definitely break it up even more, because attention spans are just so short right now. And I think the way the world is right now with pandemic, and we just need to have even more bite-sized content. So I'd probably approach it differently. And that's something that the analytics, and in our last several photo essays we posted out, I'm seeing less and less engagement for less and less time. They're just not patient. So I need to be even sharper in my edit. I need to be more concise. I need to start thinking like, okay, how do I make this 20 images, and tell a story in 20 images versus 100. Have you guys experienced some of that?
You're asking me?
Sure. Yeah.
I don't I don't do the analytics myself to the extent you do. We anecdotally hear back, and usually people don't want to talk about it unless they're saying something good about it. So yeah, we don't sort of hard, honest critiques aren't our thing.
Yeah, I'd say more and more we're seeing with our numbers, people want to consume it the way they consume social media. They want to consume it quickly. If they can't get through your photo essay in a couple minutes, it's probably too long. And that's changing our approach to some of this stuff. I still think exposure is a great platform, and Spark's a great platform, but it's not the only platform. I need to also think, okay, can I tell this photo essay in an Instagram story? And that's something that's a change for us. That's a big change for us. But boy, an Instagram story, you're going to have a lot of engagement and you're going to have a lot of reach in a really simple way. That changes how you do your photos. You're talking vertical versus horizontal, or maybe you do a layout of multiple horizontals. We need to adapt to the audience, right? And I think that's something that we're all going to struggle with the next couple of years, is how do we keep it concise? But social media is giving us like, hey, this is what we want. We want to have it short. We want to have it easily digestible. Unfortunately, people are not willing to spend the time to dive into a 20 or 30-minute thing. And you look at newspaper and media articles, they're all getting shorter and shorter and shorter because very few people want to do a deep dive. So that does change how I approach in shooting and distributing these stories.
So along those lines, we started using Adobe Spark and our big thing is everyone's on a normal year and thing is graduation, commencement,
Yeah.
all that stuff. So we started using Adobe Spark to tell our commencement story for our spring commencement. But what we've been doing is taking all the pictures, taking the video, and then seeing what we have and putting it all together. This is going to be the first semester where I've pushed to say we need to come up with stories beforehand and come up with the idea of what story we're going to push to Instagram, what story are we going to put in, kind of make the pullouts, like the profiles and all this stuff, and try to stick along that goal. Like what great story is going to be the video, what great story is going to be the lead out inspiration type stuff. We haven't done that before.
Yeah.
Is to actually pre-plan. And I'm interested to see how that works compared to just kind of throwing everything out there under a link saying, hey, take a look at everything.
Yeah, I think number wise, a giant photo gallery, they're just not doing as well. I mean, we look at ours, They just don't do as well anymore. I think you need to tell stories. I think that the difference between a photo gallery and a photo essay is a photo essay is curated and created to tell a story, a beginning, a middle, and an end. And we're storytellers. You're talking something that's through the entire human history. We pass along information through stories. We pass along our values and our beliefs and what's important to us through stories. And we as photographers, we're visual storytellers. And that is a skill that we all need to work on and get better at. And I think if you can identify a story beforehand, you're going to tell a better story. When you just shoot everything and see what sticks on the wall, I think you're going to miss some things. I think you're going to waste some effort. And I think that you'll have this experience, you'll be more focused on the stories and you'll be quicker at turning those stories around also, which is also, I think, really important. And when I say that people are less interested in long photo essays, it doesn't mean that we don't do them. We still try to do them. We're just doing better, I think, at distributing them. Maybe we're breaking them up into smaller pieces instead of just one thing. But I do really think it's important we go out and tell these deep stories. And when you tell an involved photo essay, when you tell that story, you're getting some of the amazing stuff, but you need to make sure that you don't stray from the story too much. The story is the point. The story is how you're going to convey those thoughts and those emotions and those feelings. And the story is how people are going to consume it and understand it. So make sure that the story is at the forefront. Oh, come on. You guys all got more questions than this.
You talked about some of the ways that you distribute these things, social, magazine, exposure, obviously. Can you think of any others where they'd be used?
Oh, wall art is a great one, and we definitely will reach out and say, hey, here's some great photos of your dance groups from the tour. Would you guys like any prints of these? We also put them into our stock gallery that's used on campus. They're used in lots of different things on campus. Social, I'm also making sure that I'm reaching out to the social media managers for each of those groups and saying, hey, here's stuff that you guys can use for the next year's of, you know, when you're trying to promote, here's, you know, what we do or who we're about or what our travel is like. They're used in lots of different ways. There's definitely the primary usage was kind of that storytelling for the university magazine and university homepage. And then after that, it just kind of trickles down into lots of different uses. Good question.
I had a quick question. I loved how you you captured those group photos that I think are important, but then you have these really beautiful, you know, photojournalistic moments. And I find like when I combine those two things, they're hard. Do you find them challenging to mix the two? Because I'm always, I think there's like a great purpose for those group photos that you want people to see them and to look at them, and that could get them to your gallery. But then sometimes it feels out of place to throw it into all your moments. Do you have a challenge? I felt like you look like you did a good job of marrying those two, but I always feel challenged with that.
Yeah, you know, I think, again, I think with sometimes they'll think you're there to just take their selfies for them, right? And that's definitely not what I want to get it into. Sometimes I'll have to tell them, hey guys, just do your thing. I'm just taking some pictures of documenting what you're doing. Other times, yeah, take the group shot, take the thing, and it builds that bridge between you, and they trust you more. They're more open. They don't, like, say, I don't know if you've ever done it. Whenever you do a photo essay, and like the first day or so, the people just flinch every time the camera comes up, right? It helps you get past that. Once you get past that, then they're comfortable saying, hey guys, yeah, I don't really want you to look in the camera right now. Just do your thing. I'm just gonna stay here. And that sometimes means you have to wait for 5 minutes for them to calm down, right? And just to get back into their routine. I think that's something you just have to deal with. I know with the football team, I'm struggling with that right now, where, you know, they get the images that we shoot, so they're, you know, pointing at the camera, doing this, you know, and I'm like, okay, I got that. Go do your thing now. I'll take some pictures of you working out, or I'll take some pictures of you getting dressed, or whatever. It's just part of the game. I think you just have to be embedded. You know, you have to make sure that you're part of the group and they know you and they trust you. And once you're embedded, you're going to get natural and authentic moments that are not contrived. They're not staged. I'm not telling them, hey, you know, I'm going to do this whole photo shoot and make it look like it's fake. You just say, I'm going to try and document what your life is actually like, or what this experience is actually like. So don't look at the camera. If you can, just, you know, ignore me. And I feel like over time, they get comfortable with that, especially when you're showing them the images. Like, oh yeah, that moment when you weren't looking at me, look what the image looks like. You show them the back of your camera and they're like, oh wow, that's awesome. Then they trust you. Then they understand what you're trying to accomplish. But that's a great question. And I think that's a constant challenge. Looks like Lonnie had a question about the R3 and the R5. The Sonys are great. I don't have any huge problem with the Sonys. It's just I'm a Canon guy and I'm used to the Canon, and I feel like the R3 and the R5 are so good with some of these silent moments. I've been using the R3 for the last 2 months, and I have not turned on the shutter, the mechanical shutter. I'm only using the silent shutter. And I'm telling you, when I'm in the locker room taking pictures, nobody notices. When I'm standing in a corner taking pictures, nobody notices. And I feel like that when you're shooting electronic shutter, silent mode, you can be that fly on the wall. It's this thing I've always dreamed of. And you know, with what the R3 can do in silent shutter, it's just going to change how I shoot pictures. I'm really excited to go on from here. The other thing is the R3 in low light is so much better. It's incredible in low light. The R5 image quality is so good. And again, I'm just more comfortable shooting Canon. So it was a little bit of an experience to try to learn the Sony system during this long trip. Any other questions? Looks like you guys need to eat lunch. Okay, well, thanks. Like I say, hopefully you guys can dive in and search out some photo essays and you know, teach your students how to do it, because again, it's such an important part of our craft, is to be able to tell these stories in this way. And we'll keep working together to see if we can find new ways to distribute them. That's the challenge, I think, now is we got to go capture them, then we got to find a way to distribute them and get the stories out there in a way that people want to read them and see them. So thanks again, and we'll see you guys next month.